Well, hello and welcome to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. Today we're going to focus on inner joy and happiness. So many people look to the external to find that happiness, or even worse, they save their happiness for the when I achieve this, then I will be happy. When I find the right relationship, then I will be happy. So we're always sort of holding on to that dream in the future, and then giving yourself permission to be happy only when. But happiness is a true inside job, right? It is that beauty within that is always there. It's just waiting for you to tap into to that happiness and that true bliss and joy. So today I have brought on an expert. She is a happiness coach who's going to delve into some really great tips on how we can be happy without having to wait for that happiness or wait for the opportunities. So Teresa Greco is joining me again. She's a happiness coach. She's also an educator and education technologies consultant. So let's just jump right into the conversation, because I know you want to be happier, especially with all the negativity that's going on in the world today. So let's find out how we can be happy. Teresa Greco, it's a pleasure having you here on the Mindset Mentor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So I think the first question that everybody will probably want to know is, being a happiness coach, does happiness come naturally to you, or do you actually have to work at it?
So, being happy is our natural state. So, we are always at the very core of ourselves. We are happy, we are joy, we are peace, we are love. We are all of those really great feeling emotions all the time. However, the world takes us away from that natural state and then has us feeling other negative emotions like fear, worry, doubt, frustration, anger, all the ugly things.
Those
So
are
it is.
awful, awful feelings. We don't like those, Teresa. We need help.
And so, really, it is about knowing the principles and practices that work for you that can help you to return to who you really are, which is that natural state of happiness and joy and love.
I love that, and I think that so many people have forgotten that natural state, because it does get covered up through all the layers of life, so to speak, right? And if we think about it, if we go back to our childhood, we were so happy. There's this pure joy, this rate you just couldn't contain it because you didn't even know how to contain it, right? It
Yeah.
just was your natural inner state, and I think that's the challenge is right is trying to get back to that. It's not something that we have to develop and work. It's already there. We just need to uncover it, and let's be happy. Happiness truly is a state of being that transforms the quality of your life. And when we're living in anxiety and fear and lack, limitation, doubt, worry, it's really it's truly eroding our quality of life. So I'd
Mhm.
love to talk to you, Teresa, about some of the steps that you work with your clients on how to actually find and regain that sense of happiness. And we're also going to delve into your books. I know you're an author as well, author of a book coming out this year, Steps to True Happiness, right? So if you can maybe give us a little prelude into what those steps might be. And I know you've also co-authored a book called The Decision to Heal: Pathways from Suffering to Love. And I think, Teresa, that's really where a lot of the unhappiness comes from, is through the suffering. And suffering can look like so many different things. So, what are some of those steps that we can try to really foster better well being and overall happiness?
And Tanya, I think you're right when you say that it is a matter of uncovering who we really are. And I really like to talk about that in relation to what our true purpose is, because that was even one of the questions I had myself asking as I was approaching 40 was am I living my true purpose and full potential? And in asking that question and some others, it really and through the principles and practices that we'll talk about today, it was really an uncovering of the, and I like to call them cloaks, that I adopted over the living of my life that really closed my eyes to who I really was. And now through the principles and practices, I've been able to remove those cloaks or those layers of conditioning, limiting beliefs, patterns that have kept me stuck and kept me from living my authentic self. And so for me, the very first practice that I started, this is 8 years ago now, and back then it was considered very woo-woo and weird, and now not so much, which is meditation. So now meditation is almost like a buzzword, right? There's so many apps out there, and there are gurus and coaches that are trying to help you to figure out what meditation is all about. And I think that's fantastic, because when I started it, I didn't know what to do. And luckily for me, there was a meditation center that was close to my home, and they helped me to get started. And I really feel that meditation is that pathway or that door that allows you to connect all aspects of yourself, that you're not just a human being, like your physical self making your way through the world, that you're more than that, that we need to connect our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self, that there's more than just the part that we see with our senses. There's an invisible part to ourselves that I like to call our inner magic. Some people call it that intuition, that gut feeling, that energy within you that actually gives spark to your physical self. And that spiritual part of ourselves is something that we're not tapping into. That when we do, it opens up a door to ourselves that we didn't know was there until we do that. And that was for me, that I had been living my life according to external expectations, that my life looked perfect from the outside. I had checked off all of the boxes that society, culture, religion, family, friends tell you that you need in order to have a happy life. That I have a very fulfilling career, healthy family, our own home, cars in the driveway, vacations a year, lots of beautiful material things that I'm so grateful for. But I was a product of all of the external, that I believe that we are led to believe that happiness and fulfillment is found external to us, but it's not, that it's actually found within. And that's at that point that I was able to fill that void that was and this feeling that something was missing, that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't loving myself the way I needed to. And because I wasn't honoring and respecting myself the way that I needed to. And therefore my external environment was only really reflecting who I was on the inside. So my relationships were suffering. Things were difficult. There wasn't a flow and ease to my life that there is now. And so meditation is one of those first practices that I really feel allows people to connect to that inner magic that's missing. As soon as I connected, I was floored and blown away by the amount of love that was inside of me, that was from my spirit and from divine source, divine energy, God, whatever you choose to call it. But it was all in there. And I was like, whoa, like literally blown away. And then it made me realize that I wasn't loving myself the way that I needed to, that I was my worst enemy instead of my greatest cheerleader, that I had allowed limiting beliefs about who I am and what I could do and what I could accomplish keep me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, Teresa, can absolutely relate to that. The limiting beliefs, the belief that I'm not enough, and so no matter what you do, no matter how hard you strive, no matter how many material gains you have, it's just never going to feel like enough, because inside, inherently, you have that inner belief, a false belief, by the way, that you are not enough, and everybody is already enough. You were born into this world as an extraordinary being, and you are enough. Through life, we start to adopt and pick up behaviors and patterns over time that don't belong to us. And then we live that truth, that falsehood that becomes our truth, right? In that moment until we can start to unwind it and unravel that and find that true inner joy, that inner happiness, the truth of who you are. And so, for so many people struggling, they can relate to that. They're in the same boat, always thinking, well, if I work a little harder, then I'll be happy. If I just, can afford that home or a better home, a bigger home, a more luxurious car, then I'll be happy. And you may be happy for a moment when you get those things, right? It may feel really great, but it's always very temporary. It's fleeting. That is never going to give you that true joy and that inner happiness. And I absolutely agree with you, Teresa, in terms of the meditation. For me, meditation has also changed my life in dramatic ways. And it is that space of just that quiet solitude, so you can actually be with yourself. Many people don't know how to be with themselves, and more importantly, I think they fear it because, again, there is that belief that you're not enough. And so, if I'm not enough, then why do I want to be with myself? That's a scary thought, right? It's like, oh, I have to try to catch up and be better, be more, but that's not true. And so I'd love to delve a little deeper in terms of your meditation practice. Is it something that you do daily, a couple times a day, and for how many minutes? And for somebody who's just starting, when you coach your clients, how do you recommend that they incorporate meditation, especially if they don't really believe in the whole philosophy of meditation?
So I would say that now, especially during the pandemic and all the negativity that is around us, I personally need to meditate twice a day, that I do it as soon as I wake up and as soon as I go to bed. And for me, it's one of those practices that keeps me grounded, keeps me centered, keeps me balanced. And I know inside myself that our body is so smart that it gives us physical cues all the time about when we are off balance. And there was 2 weeks ago, I woke up, my neck was sore, my shoulder was sore. And I knew right away, I'm like, I am so in my head today instead of like me on the inside. And I was like, as soon as I get home, I need to like jump on all of the practices that bring me bliss, that center, ground me and balance me. And so as soon as I came home, I went out into nature. I ate and I went for a walk, and I walked for like an hour and a half outside. And being in nature, being with Mother Earth is one of those ways that there's this calm that comes, that we can feel when we're out in nature, whether that's walking our dog, on a hike, skiing, like whatever that might be, but being outside and being with your breath at the same time. So even as I was walking, I was taking those really deep inhalations and allowing it also to bring like a calm and a peace that we can find with our breath.
Yeah, I think it's really important in those moments, to feel that way. But it's also because you are literally just in the moment. You're not thinking about the future. You're not living in the past. Nature has a great way of keeping us present because it is so beautiful and fascinating and magnificent. And there's perfection in nature that wants you to just stay in that present moment.
Mm-hmm. And that is another one of the practices and principles is being in the now. That when we can be here now, then it means we're not living in the past, which is where we are a lot of the time, or in the future, which we're more so in the past than we are in the future. But a lot of time we're in one of those two places. And the little kind of limited window of being in the now is something that we don't capitalize on, because happiness is in the now. Like that is where we can feel joy and happiness all the time if we can block out the other things that we think about. And so when you are out for a walk, try to be present, not that you're out with your phone and then you're like, well, let me check my messages or let me distract myself from being and doing, like, and to really pay attention to where you are in this space, right? And to maximize taking everything in with your senses, right? That's what being in the now really means, that we're using our eyes, our ears, our nose, if that's the case, our sense of like touch and feel, really embracing everything in that moment. And that again leads to us feeling really good when we can do that. So that is really important. And because we're not living in the past where we can feel a lot of like depression and or in the future we're feeling a lot of fear, worry, and anxiety, so we're not experiencing like any of those negative emotions, because we can just be thankful for where we are now. And so gratitude is one of those other things that I would talk about with respect to principles and practices.
Yeah, gratitude is also something that I practice on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's something that I've learned as well throughout my years that has been a game changer. And it's something that I talk about often here on the Mindset Mentor. In fact, meditation is also another principle that, is so rewarding. And so, listen, I know sometimes it's hard to start, right? If you're in a habit, right? Habits are, they're hard to break, they say. But listen, if you make a choice, you can break that habit in a moment just by simply choosing to break that habit. But if we start to really just think about the small things that we can do that can have a massive, huge, monumental impact on our inner happiness, our day, our joy, the quality of our lives, it's absolutely worth the effort. And if you're listening right now and you find that you've tried to meditate, but your thoughts are a mile a minute and you can't slow that down and you think it's impossible to meditate, simply close your eyes and just give yourself 5 minutes. Start with a minute, even start with 1 minute. That's it. Close your eyes, sit down, be with yourself for 1 minute. You can do anything for a minute. And when you do that 1 minute, then, switch it up to 2 minutes the next time you do it and just kind of keep on going from there. And you're going to find that it's not as difficult as you think. I remember one time I was working out on this, new machine at the gym. It was one of those like, climbers, right? Oh my gosh. To get through 1 minute was exhausting. 1 minute. I thought, I can't do this. Like, this is killing me. It's only been a minute, right? It seemed impossible. And then, so I did the minute. I'm like, okay, I will get through this minute. And then the next time I did 2 minutes and it was still tough. And that 2 minutes seemed impossible, but I stuck with it. I did it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kept doing that. And eventually I got up to 45 minutes on this machine that I hated at the beginning, and I couldn't do 1 minute, to I love this machine. I can do it for 45 minutes, and I felt great, right? So, just kind of like an analogy to kind of put that into perspective. The same thing with, quieting your thoughts. You don't have to, sit there for a 2 hour meditation marathon, right? And stress yourself out and put all this pressure. Start with just being with yourself in the moment for as little time as you can afford in your day, because the impact will be absolutely extraordinary. Now we're going to continue the conversation with Teresa Greco. Teresa is an author. She has a book coming out called Steps to True Inner Happiness. Did I get that right?
Just to true happiness.
Just a true happiness. All right. Well, there we go. I love it. So, and she's also co-authored a book, which we'll talk about when we come back. It's called The Decision to Heal. And we're going to continue talking about inner happiness and joy and how you can foster that better sense of overall well-being and, find that bliss and that joy in the moment. Let's get our minds to the present so that we can get rid of some of the anxiety, the fear, all of that worry that the world right now seems to be inundated with, right? But remember that you have a choice in every moment. Even though there's all kinds of things happening in the world, they're all always happening simultaneously. So we're going to take a break here on the Mindset Mentor, helping you cultivate a life you love, when we come back after this break. And welcome back to the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar. As you know, the Mindset Mentor is all about helping you cultivate a life you love. And remember that your mindset is like a muscle that needs to be strengthened and conditioned. This is your mindset workout. Today, we're focusing on inner joy and happiness. And my special guest today is Teresa Greco. She is a happiness coach. She's also an author. And we're going to delve into some of the principles in her book. She has a book coming out called Steps to Happiness that makes perfect sense to talk about today. We certainly always want to be, as happy as possible. And the interesting thing is, I think people always think that they're not allowed to be happy when things in life are not going accordingly, or there's a little bit of chaos, or there's upset in the world and upheaval, and there's a pandemic and everything. So I think sometimes people find it challenging to give themselves permission to be happy in the moment. And I want to talk about shedding those layers, and coming down through to that true source of happiness even in the midst of chaos. So, Teresa, let's kind of talk a little bit about your book, because I know your books both have some of those principles on how we can do that and get to that true inner joy and that inner happiness, no matter what is going on in the world around us and in our lives.
And I think that it's important to remember that we can't control anybody else's actions, thoughts, beliefs, none of those things. We can only control our own. So
even
we
as
really,
much as we want to, right?
yes, yes, we can't even control what our partner does. Right? We can't even do that. So never mind if we can't even control what he or she is doing, or never mind trying to control anything else, or our kids for that matter, anything, even just within our own home, right? So understanding that we have no control over that, but what we do have control over is how we think and react and do. And that's all we have control over. So therefore we can choose to be happy every day. And so understanding that happiness is a choice is important, because you can choose to be happy. You can choose to wake up every morning and be grateful for the opportunity just to have another day, where every day is a new start. Today, somebody told me that I asked them how their Easter, weekend was, and they said that it really wasn't anything grand, but every day is a celebration. And I said, yeah, I love that, that every day can be a celebration if we look at it like that we don't need big, grandiose things happening in our life in order for us to be happy and to be grateful, that it is finding those little small miracles or blessings throughout your day that altogether cumulatively amount to you feeling really good on the inside. So for me, it's waking up every morning, having the coffee that I love, being able to have like clothes in my closet that I like, especially these days where you don't always have an excuse to put something nice on. And so I appreciate like the shoes in my closet. I appreciate the food in my fridge. I appreciate kindness from like others when I make my way through I appreciate my Starbucks coffee. I am appreciating the gas in my car. I am like honestly, all day long, I am so grateful for all of the conveniences I have that make my life easier, right? Like sometimes we take things for granted, even just electricity that turns our lights on. Like a long time ago, people didn't have that luxury. So sometimes we just have to really scale it back and just really think about how easy our life is, instead of always focusing on the negative. Like I feel like we have a very negative culture and society, that there's this feeling of commonality and connection around the negative, in that people think, well, if I complain about this and I lament about that, well, people will connect with me on that, right? It's like coming around the water cooler and then complaining about how your spouse is problematic and you can't do this, you can't do that, and then everyone's chiming in. Well, what about if we changed that discourse to a positive one instead.
Yes. So I love that because sometimes it's like someone will tell you a story and it's awful, and then you want to one up them. It's like, oh, yeah,
Yes.
you think that's bad. Well, let me tell
Yes.
you my story, right? So it's like, wouldn't
Yes.
the world be different and better if we one upped our happiness? It's like, hey, guess how happy I am today? Oh, yeah, you think you're the happiest person on the planet? Listen to me and watch this, happy girl.
Yes,
Right? Yeah.
and we don't give ourselves permission to that. So that is like Marianne Williamson's quote about, why giving yourself permission to be that person and to share. I can't now. I'm like I'm a bit stuck at like what the exact words are, but
That's
it's like,
okay.
who are we not to? Who are we not to be? That beautiful person, that successful person, that whatever it is for you. Who
Yeah.
are we not to share that? And then in the sharing of those positive things that are happening in our lives, we give permission to others to also share theirs. So like you said, how about if we were to one up each other with,
Yeah.
oh, wow, this is what I'm doing, and understanding that everybody can have everything that they want, right? That we're all worthy of that. And we can all achieve what it is that we're looking towards with effort, of course. But if we really believe that we can do it without talking ourselves down, think, well, maybe I can't, maybe I can't, maybe I can't. If again, we change the discourse to, well, how can I make this possible for myself? Then we're able to understand that abundance is available to everybody and not just for some. It's
Yeah.
available and that more for you doesn't mean less for someone else, right? This is the
Mm-hmm.
problem, why people judge and they're like, why, who is she to say that, she's doing this, or who is she to have those things? Well, you can have them too.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's a lesson that I learned as well because I grew up, I was the youngest out of five, right? And so for me, I grew up with that mentality. There's not enough left for me, right? It's like I get the ends of everything, right? And it's like so I had that belief, and I had to unravel it, and I had to work at that. I had to work at that pattern because that's exactly what it was. It became a limiting belief, a negative pattern, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I did believe that if I did something, then I would take away from other people.
Yes.
And then I felt guilt. I was like, oh my God, then I'm a horrible person, if they can't achieve something because I've now taken that from them. And
Yes.
then vice versa. It's like, oh, well, if they've already done this, then I can't because there's only enough room for one. Right. And so it
Yes.
is definitely, it's a mindset. And that's why it's so important that we all foster, a growth mindset and not be fixed and stuck and locked into some of the patterns because then we can't grow. And I always say that stagnation is the death of all possibility. We need movement. If you want to change your life, if you want things to change, then there has to be progress. There has to be movement, right? And so keep going, keep moving forward, but try to stop living in the past where we're stuck with a fixed belief that things will never change, right? So we want to be open to the possibilities because all the possibilities, the miracles of life are always there for you in every moment if you're willing to see it and to recognize it. And sometimes we just need to clear the blinders away, to be able to see that without the filters of the past clouding, what is right in front of us. And you talked a little bit earlier about, having that cloak. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that as well for you, because I know for you, you had a big turning point in your life when you turned 40. We touched on it a little bit for you. It was a wake up call, right? You asked yourself a lot of questions. So if somebody right now, Teresa, is doubting where they are and maybe what their accomplishments are, or just doesn't feel happy and fulfilled, what are some of the questions that we can ask to really help us bring clarity of what are the next steps to take to find and to be happy in this moment?
I think we can, if we stop and really look at the reality that we're living in every day as clues to what we're supposed to be learning about ourselves, that life is about learning and growing and expanding. Everything that is thrown at us is a learning opportunity for us to discover more of who we are. So when I said that our life purpose is to uncover who we are first, right? To take off all the layers of things that we've adopted that's not really from us, but from society, religion, cult, whoever it is that you've adopted it from. And then once you've removed those, where you are now, you feel like your authentic self, then we can start to discover how, like, what our purpose is and what we're supposed to be doing here in this lifetime. But in order to do that, we're constantly learning more about who we are. And life is all about that, is using everything that happens to us as a way to say, how is this for me, instead of why me, woe is me, why is this happening? It's actually happening for you because you're supposed to take a lesson away from this. So for example, I was having a discussion with a gentleman who said all of his relationships all end up badly. And I said, the universe will continue to give you the same lesson in different packages. That you have, your next beautiful package comes with a lesson inside that you're supposed to take away about yourself from this relationship. But if you don't look at it and say, what was I supposed to learn from my relationship with this person, you won't find the lesson. And then the universe gives you someone else with the same lesson on the inside, packaged a different way, with, again, the same lesson. But if you don't figure out the lesson or analyze what are you supposed to learn from this, again, the universe will continue to give you beautiful packages with the same lesson. But once you've looked and said, okay, what am I supposed to take away from this about myself? What do I need to learn from this? Then the universe stops presenting you with that lesson. So everything outside of ourselves is just really mirroring us so that we can learn more about ourselves.
Well,
so when
you're the common denominator, right? So if that lesson keeps on coming up, you do have to analyze it and take a look at, well, how have I created this through the thinking and the thought patterns, right? And yes, let's finally, hopefully, wake up to the lesson so we can move on to the next lesson, right? That it will hopefully be easier and will not have all that resistance and the pain that comes with those tough lessons.
But people are more apt to point fingers at others and saying, he didn't do this, she didn't do this. Why are they not doing this? Why are they not doing that? Instead of looking at themselves. That when, this is the biggest miracle for me, is that when I healed what was broken on the outside, everything outside of me healed. My relationships healed, the struggles and the strife that I had on the outside healed and went away. This is why I'm like, I want to try to share the message as much as possible to say it's within you, that it's not in the other person. You can't look to other people to make you happy, to say, why can't you make me happy? Does it matter how many people you try to look for your happiness? It's because it's inside of you. And until you correct what's lacking inside you, then it's going to correct itself on the outside, and you're not looking for it in things, in people, right? In your titles, in the letters after your name, in your degrees, all these things to fill you and give you, some more stature, some more regard, some more acceptance, some more validation, all these other things, when you need to do that for yourself first.
Yes, you have to validate yourself and feel significant because you are significant. And that is the problem. We get stuck in a trap of, expecting other people to make us feel happy, to fill in, those gaps where we don't feel whole. You already are whole, right? And so a lot of relationships are very much like that. Like, you're waiting for the other person. When I meet that other person, then I'll feel whole, and then my life will be perfect and it'll be happy. Well, that's not the case, because, think about it. If you've thought that and then you had a relationship, did you actually feel whole? I mean, if you don't work on yourself and feel that outside of a relationship, that relationship or that job or that material thing will never create, that gap for you, right? You really need to be able to validate and honor and appreciate and love yourself. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to continue here on the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar, and today's special guest is Teresa Greco. She's a happiness coach and author, and we're going to talk talk more about how she was able to heal, and foster better overall happiness. So stay with us, and we'll be back here on Sauga 960 AM. Welcome back to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960. I'm Tania Kolar. And are you feeling happy? That is the big question today. And I certainly hope the answer is a big, fat, giant yes. But the reality is, I know that so many of you are suffering right now. And certainly with a pandemic, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety, people struggling with trying to pay the bills, trying to make sure there's food on the table, trying to reinvent themselves, thinking about what's going to happen in the future. And I think it's so important. And first of all, I want to acknowledge everybody who is struggling and suffering. My heart goes out to you, and certainly anyone who has lost a loved one during this time. But even through the heart of our challenges, when we are in the thick of those challenges, we can still find that inner happiness because it's always there. So today I have my special guest, Teresa Greco, joining me today. She's a happiness coach. She's also an author. And one of her books that will be coming out is called Steps to Happiness. And so we're going to really focus on happiness. And one of the things that we were talking about just before we took a break was validating ourselves, feeling significant without having to have somebody else make you feel better, right? Or the external world and the circumstances around us to be perfect, because we know those circumstances are not always going to be perfect, right? It's just that's life. It's not going to be perfect. So I think one of the key things is really fostering that self-love. So Teresa, let's talk about self-love. I know for your journey as well, when you were turning 30, you had a big sort of revelation and trying to heal some of your past. So let's talk about how self-love played into that. What was it like before that point of feeling happier in your 40s versus where you are today?
So I would say there were things that I was struggling with before that I blindly accepted of how I used to think of myself. So every time I looked in the mirror, I saw myself as overweight, and I'm not, but I saw myself as that. I saw myself as someone with limited athletic ability. I saw myself as someone who was smart, but maybe not super intelligent. I saw myself in really the ways that other people saw me as I made my way through the world from like very young, through the bullying that I received, whether it was, from at school, from teachers, from students, from family, from friends, colleagues, co-workers, through negative comments, as we were talking about before, just how negative people are, that their people are almost like more prone to say something negative to you than to say something positive to you. To say like, oh my God, you're so amazing. That's so great the way you're doing that. I really like this about you. Or you look so pretty today. Or I love your outfit. That people are more apt to say something negative instead of the positive, which is terrible, really.
Yeah. And if we look at even, let's say, parents, when your child comes home and you've got the report card, there could be all A's and there's one C. What do you focus on? You focus on the C. But what about all those beautiful A's that were there? Why? So it's the same thing. We do that, right? We actually just, as humans, we
Yes.
kind of do tend toward that. But if we know that, then we have the ability to change that and to make an effort to switch and change our focus where our mindset is.
Mm-hmm. And so all of those negative comments became what I said to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that every time I tried something on, oh, it was, Teresa, you should get back on the diet. Teresa, you should work harder at the gym. Teresa, you should go and get like more diplomas, more degrees, more certificates, you should, more job experience. It was always just, I had to be more. Mm-hmm. But be more based on other people's stereotypes, other people's criteria, other people's ideas of who I was supposed to be. And so I didn't wake up to that until I started to delve inward, and where I was able to recognize that when you love yourself unconditionally, I don't love myself when I lose the 10 pounds. Love myself when I get the extra degree. No, I love myself all the time, every day. And that when you are doing that, then I realized I wasn't respecting and honoring myself in different relationships that I was in, that I was allowing people to tell me what to do, and for fear of rejection and judgment, and mostly those, that then I felt compelled to listen to whatever requests they were making of me without acknowledging how I really felt about it. And so in some cases, I needed to leave relationships behind. I needed to create barriers, healthy barriers that you can still have a relationship, but now you're teaching people how to treat you because you're respecting and honoring yourself first, which I wasn't doing that. And so as soon that, I would say, was probably a byproduct of me then when I started to love myself more, was like, well, if I really loved myself, I wouldn't allow someone to say that to me. I wouldn't allow someone to ask me to do that, because I should be able to say, thank you very much, but no, thank you.
Yeah,
Because
stand
it's
up for
not
yourself.
serving me, right? So to ask yourself, when we are trying to make our way through the world as our authentic selves, we should ask ourselves, how do we feel about that? And what that does is it allows us to tap into that intuition, that gut feeling that can help us to navigate through the world. So if we think about times in our lives when people said something to us that didn't feel good inside, right? It left this, and I can think of times when super young in the playground at school, right? Where, the little girls are like, no, you're not playing with us today. And you're there feeling like this doesn't feel right. But then we rationalize the situation to say, oh, it's okay, right? So our boss has said something unkind, our spouse, our friends, our mom, whoever that is, has said something. And you're kind of left there like, I don't really agree with what you've said right now, or I don't really it doesn't feel good. But instead of rationalizing it by saying, well, they just had a bad day, well, it's my boss, so I should just take it. Well, no, really, we shouldn't be just taking it, and maybe we shouldn't be rationalizing and making excuses for how people are mistreating us. That if we really loved ourselves, we would not accept that. And we would say, listen, either you respect who I am, or we're not friends anymore. We're not partners anymore. We're, whatever that needs to be for you.
Well, sometimes you have to make those really hard decisions, right? They don't, they're very challenging, right? So they may feel really uncomfortable in that moment, but deep down, that intuitive feeling, that it's the right choice, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you really need to tap into that inner knowing, to sort of be guided, allow yourself to be guided, because when you suppress and you hide all of those emotions, and you don't stand up for yourself, and you're not vocal when somebody has, hurt you or said something that was offensive, you suppress all of that. And when you suppress all that emotion, it's a dangerous thing, right? Especially if you do that for years and decades,
Yes.
right? So you want to honor yourself. And if something and someone has not honored and respected you, then make a decision, either be vocal about it or remove yourself from that. And,
Yes.
and I always say, if you're in a situation where people are not respecting you, or they're just so negative and they have nothing great to say, take yourself out of that environment. Why are you there? Why are you
Yeah.
prolonging it? And I know it's tough, especially if it's family members, right? I mean, so we love our family members, but then just minimize your time. If you can't completely, remove yourself, just try to, wean the time that you're spending, because it does erode your confidence. Especially if you have someone who's constantly criticizing you or being negative towards you, right? It's a burden that we take on, but it's a burden that we don't have to take on. So it's important to have a voice, to speak up for yourself. Don't let other people abuse you emotionally, obviously physically, but also the emotional aspect can be so detrimental. But it's what we tolerate from other people. But we really need to start honoring ourselves and be the best version of ourselves and find that true inner happiness. And unfortunately, we're out of time. So I want to say thank you, Teresa Greco. It was an absolute pleasure having you here. And thanks for helping to shed some light on shedding the layers to happiness.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great way of putting it.
Well, we certainly accumulate many layers throughout our journey here on this planet, and we certainly will experience challenges in life. That's why we're here. We can't escape them, but it's how we really look at them. And as Teresa had talked about earlier, let's look at the opportunity here. What's the opportunity in these challenges? And maybe that opportunity is that you can help somebody else get through that challenge as well, because you've already been able to sort of tackle that, right? And there's a difference in terms of just hearing something and actually experiencing it, right? So that we can teach others. So that is a wrap for today's The Mindset Mentor. Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember that your mindset is like a muscle that needs to be strengthened and conditioned. So I really want you to focus on that growth mindset. Know that you can evolve to the best version of yourself. Yes, it may take a little bit of work. It may feel tough, but let me tell you, it is worth every moment. And I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 1 p.m.